There's a man who cries on camera now. He talks about childhood trauma, admits his mistakes, and laughs at the monster he used to be. He speaks about love, forgiveness, and the medicine that saved his life. That man is Mike Tyson. And if you knew him in the 90s, when rage was his language and violence was his currency, you wouldn't believe the transformation. Today, Mike hosts Hotboxin' with Mike Tyson, a podcast where he interviews philosophers, comedians, and spiritual leaders while smoking cannabis. He raises pigeons in his backyard, the same birds bullies killed when he was a child. He meditates daily. He's been married to Kiki for 15 years. He's sober, reflective, and at peace. The man who once bit off Evander Holyfield's ear now talks openly about inner healing and psychedelic therapy. The contrast is staggering. The Mike of 1997 would have mocked the Mike of 2024, called him soft, weak. But that's the point. The old Mike is dead. The new Mike is finally alive. This peace didn't come easy. It came from hitting rock bottom so hard that the only direction left was inward. This is the story of how Mike Tyson finally learned to forgive himself, and how at 58 he's living the best years of his life. Before peace, there was chaos. Mike Tyson in the 1990s wasn't just a fighter. He was a walking storm. Rage, paranoia, violence, everything inside him was broken. The signs were always there. The ear bite in 1997 wasn't isolated. The arrests, the outbursts, the bizarre interviews where he seemed detached from reality, but nobody understood what was really happening. Mike didn't either. He operated on survival instinct. Fight or be destroyed. Trust no one. Feel nothing. After bankruptcy in 2003, after the money disappeared and the hangers-on scattered, Mike was alone with himself. And what he found was terrifying. Childhood trauma he'd never processed. Sexual abuse he'd never spoken about. Rage he'd never understood. Guilt he'd carried for decades. He'd been abandoned by his father at 2. Bullied relentlessly for being small with a lisp. Sexually abused by teenagers in his neighborhood when he was 7 and 8. His mother, Lorna, loved him but was overwhelmed, dying when Mike was 16. He never got to say goodbye. Cus D'Amato gave him purpose, but Cus died before teaching him how to be human, how to process emotion. So Mike became a machine, and when the machine broke down, he had no idea how to fix it. By 2005, Mike Tyson wanted to die. Not abstractly, really. He was broke, clinically depressed, addicted to cocaine and prescription painkillers. His body was falling apart from decades of abuse, arthritis in his hands, chronic back pain, torn ligaments. His mind was worse. His fights were public embarrassments. In 2004, knocked out by Danny Williams in round 4. In 2005, quit on his stool against Kevin McBride, an unknown Irish heavyweight. "I don't have the stomach for this anymore," he told reporters. His last professional fight at 38, looking 20 years older. His children barely spoke to him. He'd been absent for years, too high, too drunk, too consumed by his own chaos to show up for birthdays, school plays, graduations. They loved him, but didn't trust him. Mike couldn't blame them. He'd wake up, if he'd slept, thinking, what's the point? The money gone, fame gone, respect gone, boxing gone, just a broken man in a broken body with a broken mind. He considered suicide multiple times. Hotel balconies at 3 a.m., pills in his hand counting dosages, closed garages with the engine running. "I wanted to be dead," he admitted years later, "but I was too scared to die, so I just kept living, barely." Friends found him passed out in strip clubs, money scattered on the floor. In hotel rooms with strangers, drugs on the nightstand. In random cities, waking up not knowing where he was. The man who once made $30 million per fight couldn't afford rent. The man who terrified champions was now afraid of his own thoughts, his own reflection. Something had to change. But change required asking for help, admitting he couldn't do it alone, and that terrified him more than any opponent. In 2006, Mike checked into rehab, not willingly. Friends staged an intervention. It was a private Arizona facility, quiet, away from cameras. It didn't go well at first. Mike didn't know how to be vulnerable. He lied, deflected, charmed, kept everything locked inside. But slowly, something cracked. A therapist asked about his mother, Lorna May. She died when Mike was 16. He'd never grieved, never processed the loss. Did you love her? And Mike, for the first time in 30 years, broke down crying. Real, body-shaking sobs. That was the beginning. Mike started talking. About Brownsville, about the bullies who killed his pigeon, about being molested at 7 and 8, about Cuss dying when Mike was 19, about Robin Givens humiliating him on national television in 1988, about feeling like a fraud his entire career. Therapy didn't fix Mike, but it gave him a language for his pain, words for feelings he couldn't name, permission to be broken, and a path toward healing. By 2010, Mike was sober from cocaine and alcohol for 3 years, in therapy regularly, meditating when he could, doing everything right according to traditional recovery, but still broken, still angry, still haunted by nightmares and flashbacks. Traditional therapy helped, but wasn't enough. The trauma was too deep, too old. A friend who'd also battled trauma recommended ayahuasca, a plant-based psychedelic brew used in Amazonian ceremonies for centuries. Mike was skeptical. He'd spent years getting sober from substances. Why take another one? Because this isn't cocaine, his friend said. This isn't about escape. It's about facing everything you've been running from. But he was desperate. In 2010, he traveled to Peru to a small retreat center and participated in his first ceremony. He sat in a circle with strangers, drank the bitter tea, and waited in the darkness. What happened changed his life. I saw everything, Mike said later in interviews. Every person I hurt, every mistake, my mother struggling to raise us, Cuss believing in me when no one else did. Myself as a child, terrified, just wanting to be loved, and for the first time in my life, I forgave myself. Psychedelics don't erase trauma. They don't cure PTSD overnight, but they opened doors Mike didn't know existed. Showed him his rage wasn't him, it was something he carried, something put there by abuse and neglect. And if it had been put there, it could be released. Over the next years, Mike tried psilocybin mushrooms and 5-MeO-DMT, toad venom, one of the most powerful natural psychedelics known to science. One session lasts 15 minutes but feels eternal. Mike has done it over 50 times. Each session, he says, peels back another layer. I died on that medicine, Mike said. The old Mike died, the angry Mike, the violent Mike who couldn't forgive. That person doesn't exist anymore. Someone else came back, someone who could love, someone who could cry, someone who could be happy without destroying something. Critics call it New Age nonsense, but Mike doesn't care. That medicine saved my life. I wouldn't be here without it. My kids wouldn't have a father. I'd be dead or in prison. That's the truth. With clarity came responsibility. Mike had to face the people he'd hurt, his 7 children, his ex-wives, opponents, friends he'd betrayed. He started with his kids. Some were ready to talk, others weren't. His oldest children, who'd lived through the worst years, were skeptical. Mike didn't push, just showed up consistently. For years, proved through action he'd changed. Slowly, some let him back in. Phone calls got longer, visits more frequent. They asked hard questions. Where were you? Why drugs over us? Mike didn't make excuses. I was sick. I'm sorry. He apologized to Evander Holyfield publicly, sincerely. Holyfield forgave him. They became friends. The earbite became a punchline. He apologized to Robin Givens. She didn't forgive him. That was her right. Mike accepted it. He married Kiki Spicer in 2009. She'd known him before fame, during chaos, after bankruptcy. She loved him for who he could become. She manages his money now, keeps him accountable. They have 2 children. Mike is present, attentive. The father he never had. He coaches sports, helps with homework, shows up. Not perfect, but there. And for Mike, that's revolutionary. By 2015, Mike was stable for the first time in his adult life. Sober, in therapy, healing. His relationship with his kids was improving. His marriage was strong, but he needed purpose. Boxing was gone. The spotlight had faded. What was left? Who was Mike Tyson if he wasn't Iron Mike? He started small, acting cameos in The Hangover, playing an exaggerated version of himself. Commercials, guest spots on talk shows. Then a one-man Broadway show, Mike Tyson, Undisputed Truth, where he told his story, the abuse, the addiction, the redemption, in his own words. Raw and honest, surprisingly funny. Audiences loved it because Mike was finally real, vulnerable, human. In 2018, Hot Boxin' with Mike Tyson launched, a podcast where he smokes cannabis with guests, comedians, fighters, musicians, philosophers, and has deep, often bizarre conversations. Early guests were skeptical. Mike Tyson hosting a podcast? What would he even talk about? But it worked. Mike asked profound questions. Do you think animals dream? What happens when we die? Do you forgive your parents? He laughed at himself, cried with guests, showed vulnerability. The podcast became a hit with millions of downloads. In 21, Tyson 2.0 Cannabis Company launched. Mike became a vocal advocate for cannabis and psychedelics as healing tools for trauma and PTSD. He spoke at conferences, gave interviews, shared his story. Not to sell products, but to destigmatize substances that saved his life. If my story helps one veteran not kill themselves, he said, it's worth every bit of criticism. By 2020, Mike was making millions again, not from violence, from honesty, from showing people that transformation is possible, that healing is real. Today, Mike Tyson is 58. He lives in Henderson, Nevada, a quiet suburb outside Las Vegas, with Kiki and their kids. His home is modest, 4 bedrooms, a normal kitchen, a backyard with a large aviary where he raises pigeons, the same birds bullies killed in his childhood, the birds that got him into his first fight. Now he protects them, feeds them, watches them fly. They're peaceful, he says. That's what I needed. Peace. He wakes at 6 a.m., meditates 20 minutes, not always successfully, his mind still races sometimes, but he keeps trying, tends his pigeons, records podcasts 2 or 3 times a week, cooks dinner with Kiki, helps kids with homework, watches movies, ordinary things, the kinds of things he never had time for when he was famous, fighting, spiraling. Now they're his favorite things. He still struggles. Some days are harder than others. Trauma doesn't disappear just because you did therapy or took medicine. There are mornings he wakes up feeling the old rage creeping back, nights where memories are too vivid to sleep. But he has tools now. Therapy every 2 weeks, meditation, breath work, psychedelics when he feels called to do another session, and most importantly, a support system. People who love him for who he is, not what he was. He's reflective in ways he never was. In interviews, he talks about regret, the people he hurt, years wasted, women he abused emotionally, children he neglected, but there's no self-pity, no excuses, just acceptance. I was sick, I didn't know how to be well, now I do. That's all I can say. He's generous with his story, talks openly about psychedelics on his podcast despite the controversy. If it helps one person, if one veteran tries therapy instead of a bullet, if one addict realizes healing is possible, then it's worth every bit of criticism. He's become an advocate for men's mental health, especially those who've never learned to process trauma, who are taught vulnerability equals weakness. I spent 50 years running from pain. It almost killed me. Don't do what I did. Ask for help. It's not weak. It's the strongest thing you can do. On his podcast, he doesn't dominate anymore. He listens, asks guests about their pain and healing, cries with them, laughs with them, holds space for them. The opposite of the old Mike. That Mike only knew how to hurt. This Mike knows how to heal. Mike Tyson's transformation is one of the most unlikely in sports history. The man who represented rage and violence for decades now represents healing and hope. It defies logic, yet here he is, 58, sober, healed, happy. The lesson isn't that psychedelics fix everything. They don't, but they open doors, gave him tools to process decades of pain. The lesson isn't that one therapy session changes you. Mike spent years in therapy, thousands of hours. It was slow, painful work, but it worked because Mike showed up, consistently, even when it hurt. The lesson is simpler. It's never too late. Mike was 50 when he started healing, 50 years of trauma, rage, and pain, and he still found a way out. Not because he was special, but because he was willing to look inward, to admit he was broken, to ask for help. He did it by being vulnerable, admitting on TV he'd been molested, wanted to die, hated himself, crying in front of millions, saying, "I was wrong, I'm sorry, I'm trying to be better." He did it by forgiving himself, harder than forgiving anyone else. But holding on to guilt wasn't helping. So he forgave himself, not because he deserved it, but because staying broken wasn't serving anyone. Today, Mike says the happiest he's ever been is now, not at 20 and undefeated, not with $400 million, now. At 58, with a modest income and a clear conscience, I don't need to be Iron Mike, I can just be Mike, and Mike is enough. The tragedy would have been Mike dying at 50, broke, alone, hating himself. The miracle is he chose to live. And in choosing to live, he learned to heal. So here's the final question. Is Mike proof anyone can change? Or is he the rare exception? Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe what matters is he tried and showed millions that transformation is possible, that you can spend 50 years as a monster and still become a man, that it's never too late. Mike Tyson is living proof.